All right, and we are back for episode two. I'm trying so hard to have a straight face with this. See, I'm gonna be my real self, Ariel. This is what it is. Um, of the due process coach, and we have a special guest today. My very dear friend, Ariel Larpenteur, is here to chat with us about what I would think would be start to be a hot topic for people in
Hmm.
districts. At least I hope they are. About extended school year and what needs to go into that on the due process side of things. I'm going to let Ariel introduce herself and who she is. This is the fun part where you have to talk about yourself that I'm never good at. But Ariel, will you please tell everybody about yourself?
Yes, my name's Ariel Larpenter. I'm from Minnesota. And when we're talking about ESY, it is the most wonderful topic because it is negative 100 in Minnesota in the cold, deep freeze right now. And this will be my 11th year thinking about ESY in a capacity of that due process role. So I'm really excited to talk about that today. As the best directors and administrators say, like, think about it early and often. I have been a special education teacher, again, thinking about ESY and due process now for the better part of a decade. I've worked with Christine in two different capacities before, and happy to be here today to talk about what I've been doing a lot lately, which is just that paperwork, right?
Exciting. Yeah, this is super fun. I always say to people, I'm like, I wish that they could listen in on our conversations and
Mm,
what those sound like, minus like probably what we'd have to beep out of here.
yeah. So I think like that's what I've been saying to teachers lately. I'm like I see all these teachers go like I'm burned out of the classroom. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, so you're gonna go get an admin license and what are you gonna do with that? Well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, come for our jobs, which is due process. Like thinking about if you're good at paperwork, if you're good in that litigious or logistical mind, like one, two, three.
Mhm.
Or if A, then B, like this is what we do, and we talk a lot about it. Sometimes we talk in circles,
We do.
right? Sometimes we talk in rays, like sometimes there's just two spots and we're right there in the middle. And then sometimes it's the infinite abyss. And sometimes, we'll get to a topic and we'll be like, I don't know. I don't know how I don't know, but I don't know. So
But
I'm
I'll find
hoping
out.
today when we talk about ESY that it's a little bit more of the
Yeah.
concrete steps that you can do to set yourself up for a nice summertime.
I know it's weird to think that summer is coming. Yeah. So ESY has been kind of a big topic, I think, for all of our districts at this point, just because we're starting to really think about what do our students need in the summer,
Mhm.
what don't they need, what can they get from the general education, and what can they get from special education. And I think this is a big topic in a lot of districts because it's that fine line of deciding who goes where. Um,
Yeah.
can they survive in, that general education summer school? Or do they truly need extended school year because they have specific skills that need to get worked on? And I think
Mhm.
that's what we really have to think about as special education teachers is which of the two is better. And when you lean towards the ESY side of things, ensuring that you have all of the due process that goes with it, because I hate to say it, but there is a lot that goes
Mhm.
with extended school year, and we don't always like to think about that. And what we need to do to make sure that our paperwork is compliant and set up and ready to go for those students. We could probably just talk about what are those areas
Yeah,
that.
like one of the things that I have is newer in my due process practice is making sure that in the very beginning of the year, those IEP meetings of September, October, November, we talk sometimes like in the meeting, like ESY qualification, yes or no. And a lot of the times we just kind of like scoff it off, like, oh, we'll figure this out later. But what I think, Christine, is what you just put a nail on the head of is that you really don't want to do that. I like to now in my practice is really differentiate the difference between summer school, which a lot of districts call it that, this summer school,
Mhm.
general ed. It might be half day, it might be project based, it might look a little different, or extended school year, and how that is just actually a totally different circle. And these two circles, they actually don't have a Venn diagram in the middle. You don't usually do some of your stuff over here and some of your stuff over there. Maybe your district is different, but we like to think of those qualifying categories just so differently. So I've really leaned in the last year of talking about early and often what is extended school year and how you would qualify. And I've been saying those things in meetings or coaching teachers to do that. So
Right.
those qualifying areas, I think sometimes teachers say, well, oh, it's summer school. And then parents are like, well, maybe they do need that. And then it's like, well, actually, how do you qualify? It's not just services in special ed. So A is our bread and butter, right? Our regression and recoupment.
100%.
Um, yeah, and so like a lot of times people think like, well, regression, that means, we're slipping back after those breaks. We take that data before and after. And Christina, I just, one of the things that like there are some kids that it's so evident you see their data
Right.
and they were off for 14 days and it took 20 days. And you can tell your teachers like, see that it took them longer than the break to recoup it. But then I see sometimes too, some off data points where a kid had a bad day
Hmm.
and they scored worse than they did before winter break. But I'm looking at this kid and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's actual regression.
Right.
So what would you say to teachers in that case? Like how do we make sure we have continual data points to show or prove that regression is needed or regression is happening and ESY would be needed?
Right. Well, I think the biggest piece is that they're taking that data because I think that's the biggest part of special education that I think sometimes we forget, right? It's really easy to like get into the groove with kids, but then not have any data to fall back on. And I think the biggest thing I say to teachers a lot too is it's not just your FastBridge data, right? Your
Mhm.
district-wide testing data. It's not just your state testing data because those are
No.
just drops in the bucket of what's actually
Yes.
happening the day to day for students. It's funny you say that because I actually was just sitting with a teacher. See, this is why I like these conversations because it brings things up to my mind of coaching sessions I've had, probably like you, where we don't have a spring break in one of my districts, and they're like, "What do I do?
Mm,
There's no
mm,
spring break. How do I prove regression and recoupment over an extended period of time?" Right?
mm,
Or the other question that just came to me too is I have a student who they were talking about was sick and out for a week. Did it
mm.
take them a while to recoup the skills that were taught? Yes, but then when the teacher and I sat down and really talked about it, they were like, but they were at home. They were sick. They weren't feeling well. So there was a lot of
And that's that thing where you're like, were they really not doing those skills or did they come back and they weren't 100% anyways?
yes.
And so, thinking about that, one of the things that I wanted to like interject was taking those data points. Like every time I look at teachers, I'm like, we're getting ready for winter break. I'm like, do your data right now.
Right
And then
now.
when we come back from winter break, I'm like, do your data right now. But reason why is sometimes I notice a lot of goals and a lot of objectives say continuous.
Mhm.
Can do this 3 times in a row, can do this 3 out of 4 times in a row. And so I'm thinking to myself, what did that data look like before and what did it look like afterwards? And if it's just a blip, then that's not real regression. We can't live our whole life on that qualifying score. Again, we're looking at it in that holistic way. I just saw a student one time, his mom was like, well, he got, I think he was getting 70%, something 80% before winter break. And then right after he dipped down pretty low, but then he was back to his jolly old ways in the
Yes.
70 or 80. And he had to go to ESY because a teacher was like, well, I do have this regression. And it didn't, it took him this long to get back to 70. And I was like, and is he, you also have to think about it. Is this data point his real self? Like where you're like, yep, that makes sense. Or was it he wasn't feeling good? He had maybe had
Yeah.
a temperature that night, things like that. So I was like, I do want to give you the permission to look at multiple data points and to
Right.
sometimes be like, that data wasn't, but maybe we'll do that again tomorrow. Like, I don't know if that one was spot on. So that's why that early and often data. Just do it and save yourself a little bit of heartache.
Yeah.
Um,
I would
and
say even
then
if they're like not if they're making small gains too, right? Like if it's
yeah.
just like these, you make a couple gains and then we're back. Those are the types of kids that I would probably be looking at the
Mhm,
most
mhm.
for ESY would be those kids that are really making minimal progress because you're doing a lot of prompting, you're doing a lot of
Yeah.
teaching. And that's what I've been saying to staff is if you're constantly reteaching the skill to the student, then we need to start looking at that regression and recoupment piece.
I love that you said that because we're not trying to cattle prod kids in the ESY. What we're really trying to do is find the kids that need it the most. They
Mhm.
still need that medicine over the summer because we want them to make gains the next year. We don't want them slipping back. And really, we're helping ourselves. If we're the case manager again or serving those students again, we're helping our school, we're helping them be more successful in that next grade. But like we're not just qualifying to qualify. And I know sometimes people will say, well, that's what my district does or that. And I would just say back to them, use the things you learn in this podcast or whatever we're doing and learn
We're gonna
your
call this.
statutes and just talk to them about like, is that really helpful or necessary? Because we also want one of the things that I am very passionate about is when students qualify for ESY, please come. I talk to parents and like this has been determined by many you know,
Hmm.
hours, if not minutes or whatever, of trying to figure out if this is appropriate. Please send them. We're waiting for them. We're willing to take them, and it's only going to benefit them. I've never seen a student that's been adversely affected educationally by ESY. I don't know about you, Christine.
I haven't, and I think we've always been really choosy over
Hmm.
who goes to ESY. I've seen two models, right? And maybe you have two of everyone goes,
Hmm.
or we're just really like picking those students that really need those targeted services and making sure that it's that specific group.
Yeah.
Because I think I've always had the mindset of I'd rather them go to that general ed summer school if your district has that because they are going to be with their same age peers or,
Hmm.
their friends and all of those pieces.
Yes.
They're going to be working on those skills that they would in the classroom. And I think there's a lot of benefit that comes with that too. And that's what I try and remind teachers is ESY is great for those kids that need the specific targeted skills worked on, but also if there's an availability for them to go to gen ed summer school, I'd rather my students do that, right? And maybe
Hmm.
we get
Hmm.
paras to help with that, or that's what we always kind of did. Like, is there a grouping that we can have to put them all together? Because the benefit is so
Some of
much.
my like kids that had the hardest time in elementary school reading and doing math independently, and needed so many services during the day, but did not qualify for ESY because
Mhm.
they were making those
Making
great
gains.
gains. I
Yeah.
could I could see those kids in my head right
Yeah.
now. They really thrived in summer school.
Yep.
They like that was like the half day or the scheduling, or it was only a couple days a week or whatever it was. Or maybe it was like the idea that like it really is not for it's not everybody. It's not everybody. The pressure's not as on. Those
Yeah.
skills were really gained. I remember being really nervous about leaving those little ones behind and being like, well, who's going to watch them? And they were like, it's fine.
It'll be
And then coming back the next year and being like, oh, and they were like, yeah, we had a great time. And I'd be like, there, I can see those skills were gained too. You must have been doing something over summer school because I can see
right.
it. Different than the ESY kids, where ESY kids, I'm really like, please let me make sure you're still
Mhm.
having 24 out of 26 letters because we worked so hard to get to those 24. I really need that come September.
Well, and I think too, there's the other side of it where it comes to like those EBD kids, the behavior
Mm,
kids, those kids that are in programs that really need the consistency and the schedule and all of those things maintained for them, even though it's a smaller
hmm. Hmm.
piece of time. I have to say, it's funny. I had a director say to me, "I wish we could go to school year round because because that'd be more beneficial than like an ESY model." And I totally agree with her, right?
I was about to say I've been thrown under the bus by many people before when I'm
Right?
like, it doesn't really work in the arbitrary
Hmm.
agricultural schedule we do based off 100 years ago in America. And everyone's like, I want my summers. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to have first class education that competes on a
Right.
worldwide scale. People don't like that, man. They do not want to go to school in July. And I'm like, well, what if we just had 4 weeks off in July? So you're right. Like a lot of those things, those are those simple ideas that, again, we can provide in that ESY for those students that have that. I also think one thing, I don't know the answer to this. It's been on my tongue, my brain for a long time is articulation kids. And that's where I would need a speech pathologist to weigh in. But like, sometimes I'm like, are they going to be able to,
Yeah.
recoup, or, are they, or does that stutter come back? And
Yeah.
then I'm not really sure where that's at because it's kind of outside of my realm of
Yeah.
um, that teacher. So if any speech pathologists are out there, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'd love to hear what they have to say about ESY in general, though, because we kind of do a different model in a lot of the districts I've been in, is we're not providing speech or OT in the summer. We're only providing those directs. I mean, not saying that those aren't direct services, but from
Hmm.
a special education teacher. But I disagree with that because I feel like there's a lot of kids that could benefit from that
Yeah.
continuous.
Yeah. I'm
related
fortunate
services.
enough that I work in a district that we have a speech and a OT on site during ESY. A lot of our ESY students are under the developmental cognitive delay,
Mm,
and a lot of them are younger. So they
yep.
just definitely, especially for their communication needs, they just need that so rigidly. But
Right.
again, I'm just thinking of like articulation as a whole. I don't know as much about how fast you make those gains or how slow it goes. And then, the other question I've had before, speaking of that, is like DHH students.
Yeah,
How do they get served? Do they need DHH consult? I actually don't know. So we talk about it in meetings. If the DHH team or audiologist is like they're good for the summer, I do defer to them because
I
I don't
know.
know. So
There's so many different things. It's good that you just said that about DCD, right? Because that leads into like that
mhm.
self-sufficiency of the
Yes.
second area that we look at for ESY is that self-sufficiency, which really plays into those DCD students and are they able to continue with
Yeah.
those life skills, and how that looks for them and how they're maintaining that. And I shouldn't even say that. It's more like advocating. I think
Mhm.
of like, will they continue to be able to advocate? Are they going to be able to maintain those skills that you've taught in that probably center-based classroom or maybe even that high resource setting? But I
I
don't see
think
a
too,
ton
some
of kids in that one. Do you?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of like fun if students have functional replacement math or reading, or if
Oh,
they're on,
mhm,
one of the things that we talked about a few years ago in like an MD conference I was in was it was like if you're on the precipice of learning something. So those DCD kids, if they're just about to gain those skills, or that we're just at that point where like we're early reading and we're almost there, that
mhm,
that 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 time off would be a real deterrent to their academic gains. Because we know that those kids, it just takes twice as long, three times.
right.
Sometimes it just takes a while. And if we're almost right there, is that break going to take away from those functional skills? Um, I have seen students as they've gotten older too, that's where that data collection and those conversations at your team meetings are so important because
Right.
sometimes you have kids that look totally different in second grade than they did in seventh grade, and
Hmm.
just what are the skills that they would actually be working on in ESY?
Yeah.
So that's another question I always have. I bring it up every year, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
or high school DCD students as well.
Yeah. I think let's talk about the last area. And then I think that
Mhm.
brought up a really great question of like, which we should talk about is talking about it in the meeting. And that students don't automatically qualify year after year after
Yes.
year, because just like you said, that student might look different in second grade than they did in
Yes.
seventh. And I think that's a huge piece. So the last area for ESY is that unique need, which is easy for us to talk about quickly because that's something that you need to go to your administrator to get approval for. And those are cases that you're not going to see as often for students.
And I would forewarn any case manager, anyone talking to a parent of, don't offer it. Don't
Yeah.
say, oh, that sounds like a unique need. Because what happens sometimes is someone will be like, oh, they moved in district and we don't know them, or they're from out of state, or they broke their leg or whatever. And you're like, that's not your call, basically. And so I feel like Christine, you and I have both had similar situations with directors where they were like, in my 25 years, I've used it
Yeah.
once, or in my 35 years, I've used it never. So you
Right.
really want to, it's not like this is a unique, because the truth is all of our kids have unique circumstances. That's why they have
Absolutely.
individualized education plans. So
I'm up with
try
that.
not to use that, try to find a different way. And
Mhm.
then if you are the golden ticket winner and someday your director says this is actually a unique, situation, I would be like, oh my gosh, right in. I actually wish that if we could have a forum of all the times that some kid did C
Yeah.
and you tell me the legit reasons, I would love to just read through them right before bed to dream
Yeah.
about. That sounds amazing.
That's a good right there. Drop a comment if you've done a
Drop
unique
a
thing,
comment.
because we
Have you
want to
ever
know.
seen it? Drop a comment. Have you ever seen it and gone, that doesn't seem unique enough. That seems pretty regular. That would be just Christina and I would love that.
Good. We're nerdy like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big piece, because we have about 6 minutes left, which is crazy, but that's exciting. We've been chatting. So talking about extended school year in your IEP meeting. This is a big one that I've been coaching teachers on lately is it doesn't mean every year. Because a lot of times parents are
Yes.
like, I want summer school again. Can we have
Mhm.
ESY? And I think it's great, right, that they're excited, but also there's a little
Yes.
hint of we get it every year if we do it once. And I've been saying to teachers, do you have the data? Are you
Mhm.
taking, that regression and recruitment over those extended breaks? Have you been watching that
Yes.
student? Because I think sometimes it's just a box, right? Like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
gonna check that because that's what
Or
happened last,
I'm not going to check it. And you're like, well, let's have that conversation because I
right?
think the same thing of like having that kind of what I said earlier is having that conversation of what is it and why is it?
Hmm.
Doing that every year in your practice, not just to get it done, but because it does help you later. Because then later you're like, oh, yeah, we did talk about that. And, I'm looking at the data and this isn't going to be a surprise that he doesn't qualify.
Right,
Or I did talk to them even in November that, this data is looking a little interesting, that
right.
this might be something. And so then you're not making a phone call home or having a meeting that this is the first time they're hearing about this in May, because that's what I want to avoid with parents. I don't want to hear the first time about summer playing in May. Christina and I know we have kids of our own. We're so far done planning our summer in
Right.
May. I want there to be a little bit more heads up for parents.
I would agree with that, which is why I do a lot of times with families, or I coach teachers to say to families, that's something that we need to continue the conversation about,
Hmm.
or,
Hmm.
I need to take more data, or that's a conversation that we will start having in February or March
Yep.
with you so you can start planning. And then also that gives your leadership team, because I know from like my leadership standpoint, I don't have ESY dates ready to go in
Hmm.
October, right? Like I don't know that it's going to be these specific dates because that might not work for the calendar, or that might not work for staffing. So really making sure that we're giving parents kind of that hard, like February, March, we're going to start having those conversations and we're going to start reaching out to families. But right now, I need to take that data. I can't tell you yes or no that that's
Yeah. I
happening.
think too, if you're like new to a district, having that what do you guys do for ESY? Do you have the predetermined dates or when do you determine it
Mhm.
by? Is a great kind of like starter question
Right.
for your admin to be like, yeah, actually, they're always these weeks, give or take a couple days, but so parents know.
Right.
Or every year we're reinventing the wheel, which, oh my, I would love to get off that. I am fortunate enough, I work for a great director who sits, I mean, January 1, we had it so far back, but I'm
Dang.
like, that's great for us
Right.
because then I can tell teachers, we have these dates. What I can help you do right now is collect that data.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point because a lot of times in smaller districts, I think it's easier to have that stuff planned
Mhm.
out.
That's right.
And I
Yes.
think in bigger districts, it looks a little bit different where you're kind of like
Mhm.
scrambling to figure out what those dates might look like.
Mhm.
So that's really good.
I think the what we can impart upon teachers is tomorrow, wherever you are in space and time, doesn't even matter if you see this in February or in September, which is take your data. Take your data now,
Yeah.
take your data later, print off multiple things about your data, schedule it on your calendar multiple times, set up progress monitoring groups. And what someone told me in a training one time is just start. Just
Yeah.
start doing it as soon as you can, and then you'll have some and you'll be
Big
happy.
data.
Mhm. Take data.
And then the paperwork will come later. All right, so we have about 2 minutes left. So I don't know, anything else on ESY you can think of?
What I love about ESY is when I feel confident in teachers' ability to at least think about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. What I don't like is when I feel like teachers don't know. So I think if you are in a position of a due process coordinator or coach or admin, is if you can show just a couple examples of
Yeah.
this is why we had this conversation. It helps anchor. And so if you can kind of even collect things throughout the years and say, this was little Jimmy, Johnny, Jew, whatever their names are, this is why we
Right.
qualified them this year. And then maybe this is why we didn't qualify them another year. I think that just helps start things.
It does. So if you have any other questions around extended school year, any questions at all, drop a comment. I'm going to share this on Facebook. I'm kind of nervous. I was telling Ariel, like, here
Oh,
we go. Share the channel on Facebook because I'm hoping Ariel will come back and
and I'm hoping to see
topic with us.
your unique need situations. That
Yes.
is real. I will come back if anyone posts that. If not, I don't forget my name. Erase me from the internet. Maybe no, maybe it's never happened and everyone's just been lying to me. But I would love
Like,
to see some unique. You can do it anonymously too if you want. So
yeah.
you.
Oh,
Mhm.
I like it though. So on our next episode will be Mandy, our
Oh.
favorite director. We love her very much. She wants to come on and talk about her dissertation, which will be super exciting.
Mm.
Mandy the Forever Scholar, which is what I love about her. Wealth
Dr.
of
Mandy.
knowledge, Dr. Mandy.
Mhm. You can be
Introvert,
a doctor, yes.
right?
So that's super interesting, and I love to hear her perspective too about setting up early and often, and any other tips she has for this. But I can't wait to tune in and hear about her dissertation.
Yeah. So if you have any questions for us for next time, any questions at all about due process that you want answered, please drop a comment below. Have a great day.